This podcast is brought to you by SecureFrame.com, the platform for automated compliance. SecureFrame makes it quick and easy to achieve a number of compliance measures in a matter of weeks rather than who knows how long. For those that have dealt with compliance before, you know that it's overwhelming to say the least. Creating policies from scratch, manually collecting loads of screenshot evidence, ensuring employee compliance, and keeping track of hundreds of vendors and documents. Sounds fun, right? Thankfully, our friends at SecureFrame have simplified the entire process to save your team months of time and effort. SecureFrame automates hundreds of manual tasks. They streamline evidence collection through over 100 deep integrations with your cloud providers, HR tools, dev tools, and more. They provide you with over 40 auditor-approved policies and give you step-by-step guidance from in-house compliance experts. If this sounds like something you want to learn more about, go to secureframe.com to schedule a personalized demo today.
When you look at consumer fintech, the dirty little secret is everyone's roadmap looks very similar to one another. Everyone is coming out with their own debit accounts or debit cards. And I think what everyone's trying to realize is that there's really very few ways to build a sustainable business in fintech. And so we really see ourselves as kind of the growth platform for the future of fintech. It starts with being able to offer everything from really seamless direct deposit switching with just, one or two clicks, and then expanding outwards to offering things like earned wage access as a service, as well as we have access to direct deposits. You put those two together, those are all kind of like these little building blocks that we can unlock along the way.
Hi everyone, it's Julie Verhage Greenberg here with your FinTech Today podcast, where we talk about the latest trends in fintech and interview the industry's movers and shakers. In this episode, I'm joined by Kurt Lin, co-founder and CEO of Pinwheel. They operate in the payroll API space. And Kurt, I know you and Ian are good friends, but we have never had a chance to meet before, so I'm excited for us to have this conversation.
Likewise, it's been I'm really excited actually, I have to say, to meet. I have been a huge fan of FTT for a while now, obviously through Ian, and have followed your work for a long time. So incredibly excited that we finally get a chance to chat live.
With that said, I wish we would have had you on much sooner. Okay, so there are a number of ways that companies are trying to disrupt the payroll space. What exactly are you guys trying to do? What's your wedge here?
Yeah, great question. So I think I should take a step back and provide some color around what a quote-unquote payroll API actually is, because I think it's actually much broader than just payrolls. Okay. So at kind of the fundamental level, what we're really doing is building the income layer of the financial system, right? If you think about every time you've ever applied for a mortgage, or applied for an apartment, try to get a credit card, or like buy a car, etc., you've always had to verify at the very least three very simple pieces of information. One is who you are, two is how much you make, and three is where you work. And surprisingly, it's 2022 now, and everything that I've heard from friends is that you're still providing a paper pay stub, downloading your W-2s, packaging it all together and giving it to your broker to then go and, process things. And it's crazy, right? Like, why are we still dealing with paper given how advanced everything else in society has become? And the reason for that is because there really isn't kind of this data layer that connects the sources that have this information, such as payroll, but not just payroll, right? It's also these gig platforms like Uber and Lyft. It's many of these like future of work platforms, whether it's eBay or Etsy or YouTube if you're a creator economy person. The definition of what income and employment really means now is changing drastically, and so it really is connecting all these disparate sources of that information into a single API, and then allowing the banks, the lenders, the fintechs, those who are really trying to build the future of the financial system to be able to access that information in a very seamless way to build the future of what they're building. And so I think that's kind of what we're doing at a high level. To answer your question around the wedge, I think one of the really interesting things that we have seen is when you look at consumer fintech more broadly, I think the dirty little secret that a lot of people are just not really willing to admit is everyone's roadmap looks very similar to one another's, right? If you look at the market, especially in the past 12 months or so, everyone is coming out with their own debit accounts, right? Or debit cards, right? Especially if you weren't originally a neobank, everyone from Credit Karma to, all these other
Yeah.
companies like Betterment, et cetera, are now starting to actually roll those out. And I think what everyone's trying to realize is that there's really very few ways to build a sustainable business in fintech, right? It's
Mm.
either some sort of SaaS model where you have such tremendous amount of outsized value that you can really substantiate that price to a consumer. Or most likely, you're realizing that you have to earn money the same way that banks have been earning money for hundreds of years, right? Which is, okay, put your money in with us. We can make some element of interchange off of how you spend. But really, what we're doing is creating lock in and creating engagement with you as a consumer. And then once we have that, that debit account or there's direct deposits with us, then we can start to actually upsell you into more value added services, right? Either higher margin products on the lending side or newer age products like earned wage access, what have you. And so we really see ourselves as kind of the growth platform for the future of fintech in the same way that there were companies like Plaid who were kind of the progenitor of the first wave of innovation. We really see ourselves as kind of the second driver of this next stage of growth. And it starts with being able to offer everything from really seamless direct deposit switching with just one or two clicks for those folks, and then expanding outwards to offering things like earn wage access as a service, because we know when someone has clocked in and clocked out of their shift that day, as well as we have access to direct deposits. You put those two together, voila, you have an actual, really modular kind of way to do earn wage in a way that has never been done before. And we've seen a lot of pull from the market with that, but also, down the line, things like installment lending as a service or revolving credit as a service, et cetera, right? And those are all kind of like these little building blocks that we can unlock along the way.
So what all does it take to go into those building blocks, and how do you kind of prioritize? Because it sounds like you have a lot of things that you guys are capable of doing, which is both a blessing and a curse as a fellow founder. So how do you prioritize which ones you go towards and what exactly goes into it?
Yes, a painful problem for any fellow founder. So I'm glad you can commiserate. I think you hit the nail on the head here, which is with a platform like this, there are so many use cases that the biggest danger we really have is just, do we bite off more than we can chew? And there's actually a pretty simple answer to it from our perspective, which is just really understanding where the market is pulling us. And so I like to joke with our team that, this is one of the few product roles where you don't necessarily have to have a tremendous amount of conviction for a bet that maybe contrarian or otherwise, because the pull is always so strong with our customers. Like usually, if one customer is asking for it, so are the next 25 to 30 that we're talking to, and so all of a sudden it becomes, oh, like it's really obvious that we should be rolling out an earned wage access product and as our next big bet, or hey, everyone keeps asking us for an automated tax solution. Great, we have access to your paychecks in real time. We also have access to your W-2s. Why couldn't we build a real-time W-2 with all the customers who are really asking for it, right? And so it's actually this like really, it makes, I think, our jobs really easy from a product roadmap standpoint, because it's just customers banging on our door being like, please build this, please build that. And then it really is just making sure that we can actually do what they want really, really well. And then try to get as much of it done as possible, which is why we are growing the engineering team at the clip that we are.
Yeah, so you guys have raised a couple of funding rounds within the past year or so. What has that funding largely gone to? I would assume engineers, as you said, but what else?
Yeah, so for context, we raised a 7 million seed round from our good friends at First Round, and then soon thereafter, another 20 million round from our good friends at Coatue. And between those two rounds, a lot of it was just kind of really investing in the infrastructure and the foundation, right? I think one of the things that never really gets written about when you look at TechCrunch headlines or whatever is the fact that infrastructure platforms take so long to build, right? Like we were
Mm.
building for a year plus, just frankly, a bunch of us in a closet. And by closet, I really mean a room with no windows, which might as well have been a closet. Just really trying to get this thing to work really, really well, right? And once we finally got there, then it was actually going to the market and building those use cases on top of it. And so a big chunk of that was really just making sure that we had what we believe to be unequivocally the most kind of performant platform in the space, right? And so everything from uptime, to the extent of the coverage that we actually have, to market leading conversion rates, to the transaction volume we have on the platform. We're really focused on making sure that across every conceivable metric for performance that we're always knocking it out of the park. And then with this most recent round, we raised very grateful to have raised another 50 million from our good friends at GGV, and that is, I think, more of an accelerant now that we've really been able to show that we can provide a lot of value to our existing customers. And so now this is, I think, two buckets. One is continuing to scale the engineering team at a much faster clip. So, of the 60, or actually a little less than 70 folks we have on the team now, we have a little more than 40 are engineers. And so the majority of the team are engineers, and that will continue to be the case, especially as we expand the platform. And then two is, I think one of the most exciting parts about what we do is that there are more and more use cases that we would have never dreamed of, right? That we get an inbound from someone. They're like, hey, can you actually allow us to do something like offer someone's tax refund even with only 2 months of information, right? And you're like, okay, it's technically possible. It's really exciting. And think about all the applications of this, but we're going to have to carve out some folks to really explore this deeply and go figure it out. And I think that's the other piece of it, is it really allows us to kind of take bigger swings and go for some moonshots that we may not otherwise actually be able to go after if we were less resource constrained. So there's all these really exciting kind of future use cases and platforms that we're excited to invest in.
So how does becoming a CRA or a consumer reporting agency have to do with that? To me, when I interviewed Misha from Nova Credit, it made sense because they're dealing a lot with credit reporting and everything. That's the main business model. But for a payroll API, it's kind of wait, how exactly is this going to play into there? So explain that to me a bit.
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. So one of the most simple things that we do is we really just unlock data from all these disparate sources and put it in the hands of, again, the fintechs, the banks, the lenders who actually need that information to either verify someone's income and employment or actually underwrite. And so one of the most exciting pieces of all of this is we are starting to have the data to show that, for example, a teacher or a nurse who's been at the same job for 5 or 6 years has incredibly stable income, incredibly stable employment. From a risk perspective, is actually really good. So even though they have a FICO of 550, they actually perform much closer to a 700. And especially if you add in the fact that we also have direct access to their paychecks, of course, with the consumer's very explicit consent, you start to really have a lot of levers you can pull to manage risk in a much more effective way. And now all of a sudden, a lender who would say no originally is actually coming back to the table now and saying, actually, we see what you're saying here. The data actually corroborates this. We feel much more comfortable moving downstream to service these folks. And so we have a really powerful opportunity here to live up to our mission and our ethos of building a fairer financial system by creating this connectivity between where all this data sits and the lenders and banks who are actually making decisions about people's financial well-beings and improving them for these financial products on a day-to-day basis. And so related to that, we saw an opportunity for us to, when do you ever hear about a startup leaning into regulation, right? It's 99% of the time, it's we're going to dodge this thing and try not to deal with it until we absolutely have to. But we really see our role here in kind of moving the whole industry forward and establishing a standard, right? And being a CRA basically means that as a consumer reporting agency, we are liable and we stand behind the quality of our data, right? If in a world, the data that we provide to a lender ends up leading to adverse action for a consumer, we are liable and we should be, right? In what world is our foundational product data and then somehow we're not standing behind the quality of the data, right? And especially if it leads to outcomes that are bad for consumers. And so for us, it was a no-brainer, right? It's yes, it was candidly a huge pain in the ass to set this all up. But we would have to do it sooner or later, so we might as well do it now, get ahead of it, and really establish that we do believe in the integrity of the information that we provide. And it's something that has always really kind of rubbed me the wrong way when I've seen other data aggregators kind of play the card of oh, well, we're simply just passing data through, right? So if it's not accurate or whatever, that's not really on us. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like if your foundational product again is data and connectivity, how can you not stand behind it and say that yes, like everything that we provide, we stand behind because it really is A, affecting the outcomes for consumers, and B, it's also affecting the ability for our customers to actually build products that actually work and underwrite in a way that is actually going to be much more effective down the line.
What on the CRA front, how does that play into the partnerships that you guys make too? Does it make it so companies are more willing to work with you? Like, hey, by the way, like we are liable, you are not liable?
Yeah, it certainly helps, right? I think it's always uh, the example I always give to my team is, when you see a product on a shelf and it says, money back guarantee, like, okay, like if this thing sucks, I know that they really stand behind their product because, they had this guarantee, right? And I think in many ways, being a CRA is kind of like that, where it's like, look, we stand behind what we do. And so obviously, would you work with someone who really, is vocal about that and, puts that on paper, or someone who's just like, oh, well, we'll work with you to figure it out if something goes wrong. And I think the market has really responded to the decisions we made from a commercial perspective by being a CRA.
So obviously product is a big part of what you guys do, but these partnerships are a big part of that as well. Talk to me a little bit about your go-to-market strategy here. Like what are your big selling points? And you obviously you have to work with banks, you have to work with lenders, you have to work with a lot of other entities that might not be the most fun to work with out there. So talk to me a bit about your experience.
It's a fantastic question. I think first and foremost, we really think about things in kind of key order of operations, right? And so what I mean by that is, what is the first thing and the most important thing that our customers and potential customers care about most? And it really is just, does the product work not only well, but better than anything else that they can get their hands on, right? And so at the very end of the day, there's a couple of key metrics that, every single person will always ask us, which is, what is your coverage? What is the conversion of the platform, et cetera? And again, because of the incredible work of the team and again, having an outsized engineering team, we've really been able to kind of have that be a leading thing for us, right? Being able to say, hey, go connect us. And then better yet, we encourage you to go test us against, whatever else you see in the market. And we'll prove to you that we have the best coverage, the best conversion, the most performant platform, right? So I think that's one and something that we always lead with. Two is, when you talk about an API platform like ours, the number one indicator of success is how much traffic you have going through your platform. Because what that really means is that it's battle tested, it's proven, and especially if you have really big customers who are enterprise, they don't want to work with anyone who doesn't have meaningful volume flowing to their platform, right? One of the things that we've been very lucky to have is, some very big logos from a very early on from a timeline perspective. Whereas I think some people, when they think about API businesses, try to go bottoms up, right? It's like, hey, let's just work with as many startups as possible, and then we'll work our way up to the whales. We actually kind of went the inverse direction. And the reason being is when you think about all the most successful kind of generational API platforms, they all kind of followed a similar playbook, right? If you look at Twilio, for example, the Uber and Lyft two-factor auth use case was a huge driver of their business and their traffic for a long time. That was kind of what got them really on the map and drove a lot of their platform volume. If you look at Marqeta, at their S1, Square was literally 70% of their revenue, right? One would argue that's not necessarily the best place to be as a business, but it certainly is what helps you kind of really establish, credibility and stability of an API platform, which people really care about. And then, I'm sure everyone knows, with Plaid, they had Venmo as one of their big customers early on as well. And so you really see that there is this tried and true playbook here. And so we kind of did the same thing by going after some of the largest players in the space, like, Square, et cetera, to really kind of drive volume first. And in top-down fashion versus the potentially more common approach of going bottoms up.
So we can't end this conversation without bringing up buzzwords like crypto, Web3, blockchain, all of that stuff. How are you guys thinking about that space?
Yeah, so I think anyone who isn't thinking about some element of Web3 strategy is certainly already, behind the times. And I think we have a very unique opportunity here where we are building an incredible data set of consumer data, everything from, again, who you are to how much you make to where you work, and being able to translate that into a Web3 solution that is obviously decentralized is one of the things that we're thinking about and really excited to explore as we move in to 2022 and beyond. And I think it's a very natural segue for both the business as well as, again, our mission, which was to always empower consumers to have access to their own data accordingly. And so by being able to move it from a centralized format that has always been the case, right? Like if you look at Equifax or these bureaus, or they've always had this data siloed into a single central entity, and that's really not what we're trying to do. Like if we can move into a world where we decentralize everything and put it into the hands of the folks who actually deserve to own their own data, it's a much more stable approach to platform building, and B, it's just the right thing to do, right? And so can't say that we'll have everything totally ready to go this year, but that's certainly that is on our roadmap, and we're excited to build towards.
Roughly what % of your time do you think is spent on those types of things versus, traditional product? And I guess TradFi would be the term. I don't even know anymore. But how are you kind of thinking about that? Because I think there's a lot of people that believe in all of this, and I kind of count myself in that camp, that believe in it, but think it's a little bit overhyped right now. And there's a lot of things that are happening that seem like use cases that long-term probably aren't use cases. And then obviously a slew of other things that we haven't even discovered yet that are use cases for this.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think we ascribe largely to the kind of Google philosophy of the 80-20, right? Where 80% of our time should be focused on really moving the needle on the things that have gotten us to where we are now, and that we are, have very high conviction will get us to that kind of next big milestone, whether it is revenue, market share, or continued growth from a platform perspective. But we're all dreamers here, right? Like we're not working in tech because we think we're just going to move the needle 1% for the rest of our lives. We really want to make big bets that will jump us at least 1 or 2 step functions forward into the future. And so I always continue to challenge my team. I don't know if you're familiar with this term BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals.
Oh yeah, no, I have heard that before.
Yeah. Okay. It's a creation of Jim Collins, who, like, I'm a big fan of his work, whether it's like Turning the Flywheel or Good to Great. And I always challenge my team, whenever we do planning, it's like, what are the BHAGs for, each person's function, right? Like shoot for the stars and really, really try, because you'll surprise yourself if you have a great team, how much of it they can actually accomplish if there really, isn't a second choice or a second option. And so, we're really excited about the future of both Pinwheel and, frankly, of Fintech as a whole, right? Like, I really believe we're still in the bottom of the first inning here, and there's still so much left to build.
If anyone wants to get in contact with you or Pinwheel, what's the best way for them to do that?
So the easiest way would be either via email. So it's kurt@pinwheelapi.com. I have a tiny and truly tiny Twitter following, but I am slowly trying to grow that out. So people can also follow me on Twitter at Kurtis, Kurtis, Lin, Lin. And hopefully the next time you follow me, there will be more than a handful of folks following my still very nascent but quickly growing.
Well, I'll add to that list for you there too, because I don't think I follow you quite yet. So we'll make that happen. So you gained at least 1 follower from this podcast.
That is very high ROI, and I will take it to the bank.
Already worth it. Well, thank you, Kurtis. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Julie. This was a pleasure. Finally glad to be a chance to connect live, and can't wait to do it again.
Of course. Talk soon, guys.